effect at 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Moving on now, and at least 13 people, including 3 children, have been killed in the latest Israeli strikes on the Gaza Strip. The humanitarian crisis in the region continues to worsen amid a months-long Israeli blockade. The attacks come as Israel continues to deny entry of vital supplies into Gaza, a policy in place since early March. The United States has confirmed that a new system is being prepared to provide humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza through private companies. This initiative is part of efforts to bypass the blockade and ensure aid reaches those in need. US Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee said that distribution centres protected by private security contractors will initially provide food and other essential supplies to over 1 million people. He emphasised that the plan is designed to prevent Hamas from intercepting the aid. Huckabee also clarified that Israel will not take part in the actual delivery or distribution of aid. However, Israeli forces will secure the perimeters around the distribution centres to ensure safety. Well, joining us to discuss these developments and the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas is Yossi Kupawasa, an Israeli intelligence and security expert who is joining us from Tel Aviv. Yossi, let's first look at this announcement from the United States talking about aid getting into Gaza. What are your thoughts, firstly, on this announcement?
Well, it's of course very good that we are moving in this direction, because the problem was that aid that was delivered to the Gaza Strip was taken by the Hamas terror organization, and used in order to fill its coffers, so it will be able to regroup and mobilize more people to its ranks to replace those who died in the attacks that Israel carried out against Hamas in the last year and a half. So it's very good that we find a way to deliver the aid without letting it fall in the hands of Hamas.
Yes, Yossi, of course we spoke at the start of this read about further strikes in Gaza. Of course, it is important to also acknowledge the hostages that are still being held dead and alive by Hamas, given the continued, obviously, military action from Israel in the work and the efforts to make sure those hostages are released. How is that being received in Israel, given the fact that since this resumption of military activity, no hostages have yet been released by Hamas?
Well, you know, we have a plan to exercise more pressure over Hamas in order to bring them to the point where they will be ready to move towards some sort of a hostage deal, a new hostage deal. It's extremely important at this point because it's been way too long for the hostages to be in captivity, and Hamas refuses to go for any deal that is reasonable. And that's why we have to put more pressure in order to convince them to accept one. The military pressure is growing, both in the sense that we are continuing our air offensive against Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip, and we are planning also more operations with ground forces. That if this is not going to be good enough in order to convince Hamas to go for a deal, we might end up taking over the entire Gaza Strip and removing Hamas from power. That's in the cards now.
Yes, Yossi, of course, US involvement not just in this aid plan for Gaza, but also in terms of discussions and negotiations around a ceasefire, and also Donald Trump's plan, the Riviera of the Middle East plan, which of course he announced months ago. How significant and how important for Israel is that US involvement in the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas?
Well, it is extremely important because the question is what's going to be in the day after. And there are so many options, but one of the options is this option of the Trump's Riviera in Gaza. And he offers the Palestinians a safe haven in some other place because he says that it makes no sense for them to stay and live in the harbors that constitute Gaza today. And I think that it makes sense, but if they want to stay, that's another option. They may stay. Nobody forces them to leave. It's only an option that if they choose, they can take. But if they want to stay, they can stay, and then they will have to make sure that they are not ruled by Hamas, because Israel makes it clear that it's not going to leave Gaza before it's clear that Hamas is not coming back and Gaza is not launching pad for more terror attacks against Israel. And you know, with whatever happened in India recently, you understand very well how important it is.
Yes, Yossi. I want to look back to Israel now. Of course, Benjamin Netanyahu's sort of time as Prime Minister has come under pressure within Israel. Of course, fallouts with leading officials within the country. Also, protests seen on the street over the hostages still being held. What sort of impacts have there been in recent days and weeks around this, and what's the situation currently politically in Israel?
This is going on for ages. There is a very thriving democracy, and there's a lot of activity by the opposition in an attempt to throw the government and replace it. It's nothing new. It's a lot of pressure for the prime minister coming from different directions, including from domestic arena. But I don't think this is going to change anything in the policy. What is more concerning today for Israel is the policy of the United States on regional matters. And the fact that the United States has concluded some sort of an agreement with to cease fire between itself and the Houthis in Yemen. That's something that concerns us, because we believe that the Americans are going to continue doing what needs to be done with the Houthis until there is a total ceasefire, not just a bilateral ceasefire. But the internal problems are less of a problem for Netanyahu.
Yes, absolutely, Yossi. I'm glad that you did bring that up, because let's talk about it while we're looking at the regional difficulties. Of course, that ceasefire between the United States and the Houthis, not including Israel. Recent strikes from the Houthis reported in Israel and sirens heard across parts of the country. If we're looking at this as a wider confrontation with Iran-backed proxies in conflict with Israel, what's next step is needed, and should there be any addressing Iran over the current situation, not just, of course, in Gaza, but also elsewhere?
Well, it's a possibility. We are checking all options, and we focus for the time being on hitting the Houthis every time they hit us. We caused a lot of damage to the Houthis in the last two attacks against the port of Hodeidah and against the airport of Sana'a, the capital. And we charge them with a lot of damage for what they are trying to do to us. We all understand that they don't operate just upon their own will, but they are also very attentive to what the Iranians tell them to do. But right now there are negotiations between the United States and Iran. We don't want to interfere with that. And we hope that the Americans will stand fast and determined in these talks, and insist that Iran will give up the military nuclear program they have, and will not be left with any ability to enrich uranium. And that's what we are focusing on. That's the most important thing right now.
Yossi Kupawasa, thank you for joining us and providing us an insight not just on Gaza, but the wider region as well. We move on now to Europe. Russian President Vladimir